Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. We are closing out National Emergency Preparedness Month with retired Army Lieutenant General Russel Honoré, the man many Americans came to know during the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. From hurricanes and wildfires to man-made crises, how prepared is FEMA? And what about the other agencies charged with the responsibility of guiding citizens through the next disaster, especially as budgets tighten and the threat of another federal government shutdown looms? We'll also hear his take on the lessons learned from years past and the growing presence of U.S. troops patrolling our city streets. And what's the deal with that high-level meeting tomorrow with hundreds of generals and admirals? Lots to talk about today. General Honoré, thank you so much for joining the conversation. It's an honor to have you on the program.
Well, it's good to be with you.
Thank you so much. Before I get into the conversation about emergency preparedness, I do want to ask you if you have any thoughts or insight into this meeting called by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. He has summoned hundreds of generals, admirals to meet at Marine Base Quantico. The meeting is scheduled tonight. The president is expected to attend. Some are calling it highly unusual. I know I've never heard of such. What are your thoughts, sir?
Well, a basic reflection of what you said. It's not normal. It's not been done before at this level. It's not illegal, but it's not normal. And I did an interview on CNN last Thursday when this story first broke. And my assessment is the original Pentagon statement says it's going to be for a 1 hour talk. Mm-hmm. So we normally bring the 4 stars to town, when I said the DC, Pentagon, once a year or as needed to discuss changes in strategy, discuss budget, or anything that necessary as deemed so by the Secretary of Defense. But that's kind of normal. The 4 stars come to town. The combatant commanders, as we refer to them, those in the Pacific, those in Europe, Southcom, and those in the United States that defend our skies and control the nuclear force. But this has not been done before, because normally the 4 stars come to town, mm-hmm. They get read the priorities as set out by the president and the Secretary of Defense. That's their bosses. And they go back home and they spread the word among their command. But for whatever reason, I think the Secretary of Defense is having flashbacks from his days when he was a major in the Army. And the battalion commander said, I want to see all the platoon leaders and platoon sergeants mm-hmm. Out on the parade field. I want to talk to them. That would be normal. But to bring combatant commanders from all over the world with their command sergeant major, plus elements of their staff, is most unusual. They did give some exceptions because, Harold, one of the things we've got to do is maintain the ability to execute nuclear exercise. Mm-hmm. And you have to have someone in command with the codes in the headquarters to be able to exercise the new nuclear exercise. So that, and sometimes that's in what we call combined headquarters, like in Korea and in Europe. That's done with other nations. It's done as a collaborative operation with other nations in NATO and in Europe. I mean, in the Pacific, specifically with South Korea and Japan. So they would have to leave some general officers home to be able to do that. That's a deputy commander. So I'm speculating that's who stayed back. The deputy commander and all the 1 and 2 stars from those commands are coming to Washington, probably on an airplane right now. And some of those flights, I've flown to Korea nonstop. It took us about 16 hours with a shot of gas over Alaska. We got air refueled over Alaska and flew straight into Andrews Air Force Base on a C-17. But that took about 16 hours non-flight. So All those people are en route now, and then they've got to be secured tonight someplace, then get up for a 1 hour meeting, which now will be extended because the president has said, oh, I want to come talk to him too.
Mm-hmm.
And my concern there is that the president will do a partisan speech like he did at Fort Bragg a couple months ago, but that was totally inappropriate. Talking about his predecessors, talking about generals he didn't agree with, and expecting the troops to clap. These generals will not be clapping at every word he says.
Mm-hmm. Well, because you said something about leaving some commanders behind, because to me this is reminiscent of the State of the Union address, where, as you know, the entire leadership of the country, with the exception of one person, a designated survivor, is left out, usually a department secretary. It could be interior, education, or agriculture, in the event that some horrific incident befalls those who are listening on Capitol Hill. Is this a safe thing to do?
It's not normal. It's not illegal. And hopefully they're taking the proper precautions and leaving the deputy commander in charge of the command. He would now be operating where he would have generals with colonels and lieutenant colonels doing those analyst tasks. If the issue was to pop up with NATO airspace and we had to start defending NATO airspace, you would be dealing with no disrespect to second team, because the primary team is in Washington. If something was to happen in the Strait of Hormuz or some attack from the Houthis attacking one of our ships, you'll be dealing with a much less capable stay-behind staff, because the principals are in Washington. So that's the associated speculated risk, and I'm just talking speculated risk associated with moving those commanders out. But it's not illegal. The generals will do what the secretary and the president tell them to do in terms of a legal order, and that's a legal order.
There are some reports that the secretary wants to talk about his accomplishments under his watch and the future of the military. What are your thoughts on his accomplishments? General, did you hear my question?
Yeah, I got no comment.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Well,
they was saying if you can't say nothing nice, don't say nothing at all. Okay. He's managed to get much exposure over the single gate thing. That wasn't good. He's fired a lot of generals for no cause, like C.Q. Brown, the former chairman. And all the women 4-stars are now fired or been replaced. So he's executed what they call the anti-woke program and has taken down many of the established historical markers that show the diversity of our force from the Revolutionary War forward by denigrating the accomplishment of minorities and women. Some of that has been challenged, and he's brought Robert E. Lee's statue back to West Point. So those were some of his accomplishments. That, and I'm saying it in a negative way. No one says no to let's focus on lethality. That's an inherent part of what we would want to do in any given time, is be more lethal and be responsive to the warrior ethos has been around since before probably he came in the Army. It's just a basic, accomplish every mission, and it goes on, leave no one behind. I mean, it's basic bread and butter Army stuff that I don't know why you need an hour to do it and why you couldn't do it over video conference. But I don't want to sound over negative because he is the Secretary of Defense, and our men and women must respond to his orders. So I don't want to get in between the Secretary and the line soldiers. But and I'll just pause there. And I hadn't said anything that hadn't been seen in the press. So a bunch of his actions have been focused on woke as a focus, and the lethality and warrior ethos, which all those generals coming there are eligible for retirement.
Oh.
And probably the sergeant majors too. That means they grew up in the Army knowing this. They've survived in combat, many of them, for 20 years, going back and forth to Iraq and Afghanistan and other places, and travel on high seas under stress. So we'll see how that works out. But now that the president's going there, that adds another potential for something that's not normal. And I hope that some of the speculations don't come to fruition.
Speaking of someone who survived, I'm sure you were aware that one of the last Tuskegee Airmen, Lieutenant Colonel George Hardy, passed away last week. World War II veteran, Korean War veteran, Vietnam veteran, survived all three conflicts. He was 100 years old. Could you just share some thoughts about the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen as America is losing these heroes so quickly now?
Yeah, I mean, the paper reported over the weekend he was the last living one. That's an actual Tuskegee Airmen. There are a lot of people who are a part of Tuskegee Airmen chapters. They call themselves Tuskegee Airmen. But my understanding, he was one of the last original members of the Tuskegee Airmen. And I hope the community where he is, as well as Tuskegee and those in Washington, recognize the fact that he was the last of those legends who broke a lot of glass ceilings for a lot of African Americans to be able to fly airplane, not only in war, but in the commercial world. They broke a glass ceiling. But I'd like to speak more too, because even though it's late, the Tuskegee Airmen got a lot of props in movies, almost like the majority of people got, romanticized about their mission. But there were hundreds of thousands of other Black American units that got no recognition, from the Revolutionary War to the Civil War. The Native Guards of Louisiana got surrounded. Port Hudson and massacred. Once they were surrounded, they tried to surrender, and they were massacred. The Native Guards of Louisiana, former slaves and free men of color, fighting in the Civil War. Very little on history about that. In World War I, the famed Harlem Hellfighters going to Europe, and with a notice from Congress that they shouldn't fight, because if they fought on the front line, they would come back and want social justice. And then General Blackjack Pershing handed them off to the French army, and the Harlem Hellfighters fought in French uniforms. And when they were returned to the United States, in New York at a place called Hell Kitchen, the white soldiers said, "What are y'all doing with those medals?" And they said, "We fought with the French." They said, "Well, there were no Black soldiers on the front line." Well, many of them had received the highest order from the French army, the French 40 gear, for combat. And there was a big old fight broke out in a place called Hell Kitchens in New York. So much of our history has been suppressed and not told. But if anything, my hat's off. The history of the Tuskegee Airmen have been well told. But there are many other African-American units. Story has not been told. We saw the story last year of the 888 that was very prominent told their story, but there are many more like that not told. And as compared to all the movies about the majority soldiers and how their story was told on D-Day without one black face in the whole movie. Mm-hmm. So, and black soldiers were there. And that's proven.
Yeah. General, stand by. I need to take a break, and we want to remind our listeners that you can hear this and every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on our website on WHUR.com. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR-FM. This conversation continues on Sirius XM, channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation with retired Army Lieutenant General Russel Honoré. General, I want to talk about FEMA readiness. We are closing out Emergency Preparedness Month. We want to talk about FEMA today as compared to the efforts that you were leading, the recovery efforts during Hurricane Katrina. What are your thoughts about then versus now?
Well, let's see where we came from. After Katrina, we doubled the size of FEMA, increased their budget, doubled the size, and created a FEMA Emergency Corps to be prepared to respond to disasters like the size of Katrina. FEMA also was told after Katrina that future FEMA administrators must have had former emergency management jobs before they go to FEMA. Well, roll forward from Katrina to now, as of this January through about May, under DOGE cuts, they cut 1/3 of FEMA employees by offering them either early retirement or letting go those that might be referred to as interns. So we lost 1/3 of FEMA workforce with the new administration. The new administration also had posted on social media the intent to get rid of FEMA and to turn the disaster response over to the states. And that was kind of cruising along until 4th July. The president did, along with Secretary Noem out of DHS, appoint a task force with mostly people who think like them to review the future of FEMA. And that report should be coming out shortly. But when 4 July flood hit Texas, we found out how broke FEMA was. Because at that time, Secretary Noem had reserved the right as a DHS secretary, any contracts FEMA would issue over $100,000, which slowed up and prohibited on 3 January from FEMA staff deploying search and rescue teams, because the weather report on the 3 January for the Guadalupe floods had come out and said that area is going to flood. And what FEMA would have normally have done under FEMA old chain of command was pre-position search and rescue teams in a place like Dallas, so they would be nearby. So when the word came, they could easily move in. That didn't happen for the 4th of July flood in Texas, because Secretary Noem wasn't available to sign the contract. And in essence, she didn't sign the contract until the Monday. The storm hit Friday, Saturday. The flooding, big flooding happened Saturday. And the FEMA search and rescue teams weren't approved till Monday afternoon because she hadn't signed off on it. The other thing happened that weekend was on the 4th, FEMA used a contractor call center. That call center was operating on the 4th, but that day their contract expired and the contract was sitting on her desk to renew, and the fact that she hadn't signed it on Sunday and Monday, call center calls were reduced about 80% because the call center wasn't operational because she hadn't signed the contract. Shortly after that, once that hit the media, she signed it, and people could call in for FEMA assistance or register with FEMA. So many of those actions have made FEMA less responsive to the people. The other thing happened is, under this new administration and the DOGE efforts, they delayed recovery money going to many states because at the time the 4th of July flood hit, FEMA was dealing with 8 to 10 disaster requests for reimbursements from the federal government based on floods and fires and tornadoes that had happened this past spring. And all that stopped for months on end while governors were dealing with trying to recover after these events without FEMA responding. Since that 4th of July event, I must say the money is starting to flow back to the states for mitigation and recovery money. Because I think the heat got on the White House that for no whatever reason, the Secretary of Homeland Defense said, well, we're trying to save money and we're trying to use more money to secure the country and secure the border. Matter of fact, Department of Homeland Security took over $400 million of FEMA shelter money Congress gave them in the event of a hurricane to shelter people to build Alligator Alcatraz in Florida. That came out of FEMA money.
Yes, and I do remember the reporting on that. And I think when we're talking about money, as you know, there is a looming federal government shutdown. There's a meeting today with the president and Democratic leadership. We do not know what's going to happen, but the deadline certainly is tomorrow. We know that, for example, hurricanes Humberto and Imelda may not necessarily be threatening the U.S. East Coast, but we are still in the midst of hurricane season, and there are other hurricanes that certainly could threaten the U.S. East Coast. Are you concerned that if there is a shutdown that this could hogtie a response?
I don't think so. Based on the threat of what we know about the hurricane now, a coastal water event and rain event, and the current meteorology report this morning was up to 4 inches along the coast. In low-lying areas that normally flood, if that 4 inches come within 2 hours, that's going to be a problem. And the local governors, along with the county emergency management people, should be sending out warnings for evacuation of people along the coast in low-lying areas that what we said normally flood. They need to move out, and they need to move out before those high tides and tidal surge, based on the predictions of the National Weather Service on those areas that would be affected by tidal surge. People need to be very aware of that and be on guard. If you live near the coastal waters or near the inlets that go into the coastal waters of the Atlantic, you need to be prepared to evacuate. That would be the warning. And this is National Preparedness Month. These are the type of things we ought to be talking about. So I hope that does happen. But I don't think this will be a big test for FEMA on what we're seeing now. FEMA work would come more than likely. I doubt they would need search and rescue teams. This should be, to quote the president, inside the purview of the governors to handle. Because it's along the coast, they can move first responders and fire and search and rescue teams from other part of the states, as opposed to having to bring FEMA in. But I'm sure FEMA will have some people alerted, ready to come if required. That would be how FEMA would normally work. But you're right. We dodged a bullet on this with the way the storms interacted, because the initial prediction is one of those storms would hit the East Coast, and now they're going to get the effects of wind and rain and surge. The major threat.
Do you believe that the states are too dependent on FEMA? You said yourself, after Katrina, the budget was increased, the number of FEMA staff was increased. But as we have seen with this particular administration, for example, in Western Maryland, some would argue politics played a role in not getting any FEMA assistance or money, because even though the residents of Western Maryland are mostly supporters of the president, the governor is a Democrat. Do you think, again, that the states are relying too much on FEMA?
But I think I heard that issue finally got resolved, right?
It did. It finally did. And, it took a while, obviously.
Yeah.
And as we saw, for example, during the storm issue in New Jersey, when President Obama was in office, the president said politics did not play a role in addressing issues regarding Hurricane Sandy. So with the politics being unsure, do you believe that governors, wherever they happen to be, need to make adjustments? So in the event that they may not be able to depend on FEMA?
Well, I tell you, Obama responded very quick to that New Jersey, because he was on the eve of an election. So I hope he was smiling when he said that, because he did respond and rebuild that place better than it was before. None of them had insurance. Nobody complained. But the White House, led by President Obama, they were more than gracious to New Jersey in the recovery process, and rebuilt their wharf twice prior to the election. So politicians will say whatever the hell it takes to get reelected. I don't care what color or what flavor they are, Republicans or Democrats. But I have my own opinion on that, and I wish President Obama would. We need to sit down and have a beer over that shit. Him and Christie hugging was almost a kiss of death for both of them. But everything turned out all right. But politics does have an impact from both sides, sir, when it comes to hurricane response and recovery. I would like to address your basic question.
Yeah.
In 2023, and you go back and look at the records on this, you will see FEMA spent $2.2 billion helping people get back in their homes. And that was the reason FEMA, under the Stafford Act, was created, was to help people get in their home. That was the basic premise of the Stafford Act. And then we created FEMA, because before FEMA, we had the Army. The Army would respond with the Red Cross to keep people alive. And then the states would get a little money from the federal government to do some of the infrastructure. But under FEMA, in 2023, $2.5 billion to help people get back in the house. Now, that was the reason FEMA was built. You know how much money they spent on big infrastructure inside the states? $12.5 billion. Rebuilding parks, rebuilding courthouses, fire stations. You talk about Hurricane Sandy? Hurricane Sandy was in an area where you had about 15 little towns within a 30-mile period along that coast. All of them got new fire stations. All of them got new courthouses in recovery from Sandy. So states are using the hurricanes to rebuild the infrastructure. Aging infrastructure. Schools that were at the end of their life cycle during Katrina got rebuilt and replaced with new schools. And the school buildings will look like something out of third world country. So the states are using what is called public assistance from FEMA to rebuild their infrastructure. Roads and bridges. Most of the bridges in America are rated C or D. They need replacing. And there's nothing in the budget to do that. And the states are not appropriating money to rebuild state roads and bridges. So when they get a hurricane, they load every damn thing that's inside that hurricane to be rebuilt. Again, 2.5 on homes. That was the purpose of FEMA, the 7 Act. So now they're doing public assistance and redoing roads, parks, and bridges, and schools and courthouses and fire departments. And in many cases, buying all new vehicles for the fire departments. And in some cases, the police departments. So FEMA has become a windfall if you have a hurricane to rebuild your infrastructure that should be a part of the local tax base. Why is the federal government buying fire trucks for local municipalities? Don't make sense. But all these governors, every damn one, they're giving away money to oligarch companies to come in their states. You should see the money these governors right here in Louisiana gives away in terms of tax breaks for people to come in and create 500 jobs. Billions of dollars a year. And our roads and our schools are all underfunded. But they're giving money to oligarch companies, many of them foreign, to come here and in the petrochemical industry. And our system is underfunded. But we got a 10% sales tax in the state. So it's not fair. And I do think the states are over-relying on FEMA to rebuild the infrastructure because the states don't take insurance out on their schools. Listen to me. If you don't take insurance out on your schools and you have a tornado, then you expect the federal government to rebuild it. They should have insurance on the public building, and most of them don't. Because if they don't, they know the senator will get it and rebuild it for them.
That's something I don't think a lot of people have given a lot of consideration to. I did want to talk about another issue that is happening right now, and I'm sure you have some thoughtful insight on this. As you know, we are seeing U.S. troops patrolling city streets. In some situations, certainly Portland, Oregon is the latest city to see National Guard troops. And I want to ask in this particular context, if nothing else, the thing that you may very well be remembered for is, and I'm paraphrasing, the comment that you made when you first got to New Orleans in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, where you told the soldiers under your command to put down their guns because these are American cities. And that was a watershed moment in addressing the issues in the aftermath of Katrina. You could almost probably hear a collective sigh from the residents of New Orleans and the surrounding parishes who were impacted. But as you see these soldiers in cities, Memphis, Portland, what are your thoughts about what the administration is doing?
Well, I think your reference point, you have to go back to California.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Because the president mobilized the California National Guard without consultation to the governor, which we had accepted as a way to do it. And the legal way to do it, if the governor thought he needed help, would be to ask the president. He wanted to mobilize the guard for the president to pay for it in what we call Title 32. But in this case, the president didn't speak to the governor, and he just sent an order, which he has the authority to do, to mobilize the California National Guard. The president also mobilized U.S. Marines.
Yes.
Those troops, both the National Guard and the Marines, are what we call Title 10. They're federal troops. At the time he mobilized the California Guard, they worked under federal control, not under the governor control. And their initial mission was described as protecting federal property, meaning the federal buildings in downtown and in and around LA to include the immigration facilities. That has been challenged in court, and the judge has made a preliminary decision. And I think the final on that, given the federal government time to respond, should be coming out here in the next couple of weeks, sometime in October. But I think it's clearly demonstrated that was a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, because once those troops got there, and they did a good job of standing in front of the federal building. That's what they were asked to do. But then ICE started to use them to take them out on missions where they were doing raids to protect ICE. And that looked a lot like law enforcement. And as Title 10, you cannot do law enforcement under those conditions. You cannot do, as a Title 10 federal soldier, which those Marines and California Guard were under, you're prohibited from doing law enforcement. And it appeared that they crossed the line, and they had the troops engaging in securing ICE positions in the community in and around Los Angeles. As long as they were standing around protecting federal buildings, there's nothing wrong with that. But they crossed the line when they took them out on patrol. And I think we'll see what the judge come out with. They did a total review on it. But I would suspect this is going to end up in the Supreme Court, the California case. The DC case is different too, in that the DC National Guard actually belonged to the president.
Correct.
Secretary of the Army. And my take on that with the National Guard, that is a cherry story on the top of we coming to fight crime. But what's actually happening is 1,000 federal agents that show up and pick up people who speak with accent, brown and black people in immigration road. That the National Guard is I think, a ploy to talk about crime. And I love the National Guard. They do great work for our nation. And most of those troops up there, if they had to wait, they'd rather be home. But they listen to orders. And from what I've seen in and around DC, they're doing what they've been asked to do, but they're doing it in districts in a non-disruptive way to the public. They're there and they really don't want to be seen, but they are seen. And then the undercurrent is all the federal agents going around and picking up essential workers that's delivering food, cutting grass, standing around Home Depot or wherever. This is a big immigration operation and not necessarily a crime operation that is being lauded as an anti-crime, but actually what it is a big immigration raid under the rubric of we come and solve crime.
I only have a few minutes more, and I think this is a really, I guess this is a question about your historic leadership and looking at where we are now. If you had an opportunity to, if you were in command, and obviously following the orders of the commander-in-chief, how would you do things differently in these American cities? Would it be a repeat of the same kind of leadership that you displayed in Katrina, or would things change?
Well, look, it's not always what the president says he's trying to do, it's how he does it. There's a clarion cry from a lot of our cities to do something about crime. Mm-hmm. That's a winning issue for any politician saying we're going to do something about crime. The question is how he's doing it. At the same time, he's talking about cutting crime. They cut billions of dollars from the fund that was going out to local police departments to do that very thing. And that federal money was having an impact in reducing crime. So I think everybody want to reduce crime, particularly in large cities, and in some cases, smaller cities, like where I live in Baton Rouge. One weekend, we had 5 people killed. The governor didn't say jack. The mayor didn't say jack. Nobody said nothing. And but yet the bigger public, when we have a certain event happened, and I won't name names because every one of these were horrible, but some young man is shot by the police. And it was totally wrong. The whole nation shows up. But in their own cities, where 5 people get killed over the weekend, like as it did in Chicago a few weeks ago, the people ain't said jack. Where in the hell was the governor of Illinois when 5 people were killed and 27 injured that weekend? And that was like 4 weeks ago. The governor ain't dead jack. The governor hadn't visited Inglewood in Chicago. He goes on TV every day and say he don't want the federal team there or the National Guard to come, but he hadn't done jack to stop the flow of guns out of Indiana. But so I am getting frustrated with some of these mayors who say, well, we're making the incremental increase, but they're not doing everything they can to use all the federal assets that's available to come into these cities. Now, I know some of them are sanctuary cities, but some of the sanctuary rules for the reason they were put in, sometimes they don't make sense because it will turn a guy out that's on the federal watch list for a felony charge because they're a sanctuary city. That don't make sense. And the blue cities who are sanctuary cities need to get over that. That's designed to protect working people that may end up in the court, not felons, to let out somebody that's a felon because you said you're not going to turn people over to ICE. That don't make sense. But ICE in its own way has created its own reputation to be over aggressive and the use of the mask. And I know why they explain why they wear it, but that's most Southern American. But I think blue states need to stand up and blue mayors need to stand up and say, yeah, we want a condition to fight crime, as I advise the city of Washington, D.C. Use this. Tell them you need another 1,000 police, that you need 12 more judges, that you need advanced camera. Washington, D.C. want to lead the nation on how we take care of the homeless. Federal government, you're in charge. Give me the money, and we'll create Washington, D.C. as a model city for the rest of America. There'll be no graffiti. All the sidewalks will be clean and repaired. We'll have all the police we need. We'll have surveillance cameras everywhere. We'll pick up the homeless and take them to shelters sponsored by the federal government. Washington, D.C. could use this as a way through, let's be the model city for the rest of America. But that budget goes through the Congress.
Yes.
So let's use this to clean up crime. It should be the safest city in America. And we shouldn't dispute that. It should be the safest city in America. But we need the help of Congress to be able to do that because they approved the budget because Washington, D.C. is not a state. But on the other hand, it should not be a federal entity either, like an army post. It shouldn't be run that way. Because what this emergency has done is reduce the amount of people coming into Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. survives on tourism. And it's a beautiful city. I just spent 2 days up there at the Congressional Black Caucus.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. I love going to that city.
Yeah. General Russel Honoré, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you, certainly an honor for this program. We wish you the best of health and to keep your voice raised for critical issues for emergency preparedness and beyond. I appreciate your time, sir.
God bless America. Are you Buffalo? Go Buffaloes, right?
You mean the
go Jaguars.
It's a commander city, definitely.
All right. Commanders. Okay, we go with that.
There you go. The Bills are doing okay. Thank you, General. I appreciate it.
God bless.
That is the Daily Drum for this Monday, September 29th. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.